What do you see as a theme emerging for 2019? The office market seems to change year to year in design and leasing and everything. What do you see for 2019? Tim, we'll start with you.
Starting with me?
You thought you pulled.
Yeah, I was hoping we would reverse the direction, but to me, I don't know if I would call this a theme, but I think one of the things that we're increasingly seeing in the office market, more from a design perspective, is a recognition that office space reflects culture. I think there was a time when office space was just where we shove people and they do their work day to day. Now I think there's a recognition, and part of it is with a lot of the premier projects we've seen in the last couple of years, office space actually reflects important information about the characteristics and the highlights and what's important to a company. And I think new employees care a lot about that, so we're seeing a different shift.
Yeah, I'm not sure that I had a great perspective on the overall office market, but at least with Coworking here in Des Moines, we're getting ready to open a new space at 5th and Locust, which is about twice the size of what we currently have in the Bank of America building. We have seen other people enter the market with co-working spaces, or at least spaces their branding is co-working. I think we're still getting our minds around what does that mean. It's different for different people. I'm sure I don't usually talk to real estate people, I'm usually talking to entrepreneurs. So as I'm sure all you know, we work in Industrious, and some of the big national brands are really educating the market on what co-working is, and we're seeing that in Des Moines. We don't have any of those national brands here yet. And I don't know if most of you guys would know before I would, probably, if those are coming. But I think it's helping to shape that this is a viable place for people to have businesses, and has been good for us.
I think it's a recognition that office space can be a tool in the attraction and retention of top talent, similar to the culture, but what we're seeing is more and more buildings and spaces come online with different amenities that make wanting to come to, instead of working from home, actually making employees and team members want to come to the office every single day and be a part of the team and work there. And so it's more collaborative spaces. It's we have a lot of biophilics, which is a new word for plants that live. So we've seen a lot of that. We've seen coffee service, Starbucks being added to buildings. Just a lot of those different amenities that make coming to work fun, game rooms, things like that.
Kegerators.
Yeah, kegerators.
Yeah. What they've already said, I would add, what we're seeing is that well-being is rising to the top because your people are so important to your organization, and you need to look at your space through that lens. And that flexibility, or I like the word choice better, that you really are creating you're taking the entire workspace as your palette, and the employees really have the ability to use all of it, as opposed to traditionally they had assigned spaces. And that hospitality has really come into the workspace in a really, really big way. And so socialization and there's a lot of hotel concepts that you might get in a really lovely hotel that you're really starting to see show up, other than probably the sleeping quarters, but just that experiential aspect of walking into an amazing space.
I'm glad mine follows suit and can hopefully be a little bit different, but I think part of what we're doing with this attraction and retention of talent has to do with the concept of redefining the neighborhood. And in some cases, that neighborhood is your floor. In some cases, that neighborhood is your building in which you are building amenities into the building. In some cases, it might be actually the physical neighborhood of retailers that are nearby, or skywalk access, or walkability. So it's kind of the concentric circles that people can move about. They don't necessarily care if their employer owns it or not. It's how accessible and easy to get to it is in their day-to-day lives.
I want to ask Geoff a question, because you are kind of unique to the market with the co-working space, although Hubble really recently announced something called Flex Tech, I guess, which is kind of a flexible office environment. And I know that co-working is big on the coast. That's really where it's had the most traction. Who uses it, and what's the future for that type of product?
Yeah, so we've been here 5 years with this company in Des Moines. Coworking, though, I moved back to Des Moines in '09, and there were coworking spaces here that I think were as old as 2007. So it's actually been here for quite a long time. Maybe not as known, maybe we didn't know what that meant. When people said coworking, the first one that I know of was Impromptu Studio. If anybody remembers that, it was on the other side of the MLK. Our typical users are individual workers, so a lot of times that is someone who is an entrepreneur, as kind of a solo entrepreneur or a small team. It is a freelancer who wants to get out of their house or out of the coffee shop and be in a professional, collaborative space, or it's remote employees. So it's probably 50% of our membership, and that is, I don't typically refer to them as tenants, they're members to me. It's kind of like a gym membership where they join each month and pay that rather than have like a lease or something. Our members, about half of them are remote workers, so their company is in Austin or San Francisco or something, but they've chosen to live in Des Moines and want to get out and be part of an environment. I think more and more what we're seeing is kind of Fortune 500 enterprise clients use our space, and not just the individuals we've had, but we start to see teams and people locating to Des Moines and saying it's important that we have a presence there because maybe principal is a client of ours or something, but rather than knowing that we're going to be around for 60 months or something, let's try this and see if we can build our team in a co-working space. And if we ever get to the point that it's not serving our needs, we'll go out and get a traditional lease. But for now, while we're experimenting, let's just do the flexible month-to-month
How
option.
does it differ from space to work and what's offered there and what's offered at Hut Tower with Regis?
Yeah, space to work is gone now, is that right?
I don't.
I know G-Commerce is in
Last
that
time I
space, I don't
walked
know if
by
they
was
moved.
there. Well,
But what I think what they were is more individual office leased market, so it'd probably be a 12-month lease. I think that's the way most Regises are. We specifically lead with the flexibility that it is month to month, so you may start at a floating membership, which would be like the coffee shop style, like you sit down at a desk, it's yours while you're here, you're taking stuff with you at the end of the day, graduate to a dedicated desk, which is a desk no one else uses but you, and then move up into the office environment. We just do that month to month as people change. We are starting to see people that say like, well, if I know I'm gonna be here for a year longer, but give me a discount to go off of the floating, and that's a new question that we've received. How does it differ from Regis? I think the other thing that we do is we focus on people more than space. We obviously want to have an attractive space. We have top-of-the-line furniture, do all those things. We have our newest space. We've actually had architects design it for the first time. So we have a program. Yeah, architects. We have a program designed for what we want rather than us just fitting into existing buildings, which is what we've always done in the past. So people come to us looking for office space. They stay with us because they like the community. They want to be around other people. They want to grab coffee together. They want to be able to talk about the game, that type of thing that you would do in a regular office. But these are people that are used to working from home, either because their company's on the other side of a computer screen or because they're just doing something by themselves.
I can add a little to that, as JLL represents Regis across the U.S., and there are 3 Regis locations here in town you guys might be familiar with. One thing I've heard them talking about is even evolving the way their Regises look and operate, and I think some of that is taken into consideration the people that want different flavors of offices, or whether they want to just casually get together and talk with other people that might be kind of on their program. So we think we see even the internal designs of Regis changing a little bit, which I think is interesting.
Yeah, I know that Regis has kind of rebranded some of their spaces to be called Spaces, and as opposed to a Regis. I don't think we have those in this
I
market
think
yet.
that was actually an acquisition of a different company.
was it?
So
Okay.
they are coming together because they see the value of both sides.
Okay.
And I'm not sure if it was WeWork or Spaces or which one is doing, but some of them are even going to start branding their own coffee shops and doing the combination of just kind of open big tables, Wi-Fi, coffee, or wine and beer, I did notice. So you can get your beverage of choice and work and collaborate. And one other thing I'll notice is I've represented tenants and worked with tenants that are Fortune 500 companies that aren't sure, to your point, if they need a big presence in Des Moines yet, so they will try it with a couple employees, and lo and behold, a year or 2 in, they're ready for their own space, and they're gonna quadruple in size. So I think what's interesting is how many different kinds of people use it. And one thing I would suggest is I have doctors and medical professionals and artists and developers that are looking for these places because they want to get away from where their normal course of busy work is. And they're like, if you know of a cool space, let me know. I just need my own office downtown or somewhere close to their house.
Well, it was interesting because you said, I don't know, I think actually what you do is a driver for what we all do. And to me, it's like a feedback loop. Co-working in the US and flexibility and dot-com companies and stuff that was perceived in Des Moines 10 years ago as kind of out there. It's influenced, I think, typically the younger generations in the workplace, and the expectations about what you should provide in a workplace have changed. And also people know, maybe I could work remotely. Maybe I could work in your space instead of the crappy space in my office. So there's all this kind of feedback that's happening that we are seeing, your environment is affecting what's happening in the hard corporate environments being designed and implemented. And that kind of choice, as Kim said, is being sort of, I think the big question for a lot of companies is how much choice makes sense in the way we define our culture. And it's causing people to kind of question their structures.
How often are you asked, Tim, by an office client, and I'm thinking of the Federal Home Loan Bank here in particular, to sort of redefine who we are? I think that was one of your charges.
That is language that we really didn't hear. We didn't hear in the same way 10 years ago. And now I think we talk about space in a different way. And Federal Home Loan Bank was an incredible opportunity for us. But one of my partners did their previous space. And the new space is entirely different. It's indifferent for us. Part of the way it's different for us is it's got color in it. Terrifying. But they were very compartmentalized. And they realized that their space was holding them back from what they wanted to be as a company and from what they were hearing from their younger people. And they came and said, can you do a process to help us? Through designing the space, we actually were fleshing out what the culture was. And so it's an interesting two-sided coin. People know that their culture wants to be different, but they don't always know how. And the process of designing the space actually can be a discovery of what your goals for your culture can be. And I think that's a little bit different than it's been in the past.
How do you bill for that?
That's the question my partners ask me every day. Part of it is we call it pre-design. I think that there is value in talking about the process. And there is a challenge always in any kind of, building space is expensive. Everybody's looking for ways to make it cheaper. The challenge is if you're not prepared to invest those dollars and if you don't have the planning in place, you may realize we just spent $3 million and we now realize we didn't spend it in the right way. And so I think it's those dollars spent for kind of programming is one thing we call it. It's just defining the problem. The dollars spent defining the problem can be the most valuable dollars you spend because it prevents you from getting to the end and saying, oh crap, we missed some great opportunities that we now can't afford to pursue.
I've found in my experience that oftentimes it's the first time companies have to look in the mirror and decide what kind of culture they are going to have because they're having to make decisions like, does everybody have the same size office? Or are we open plan? Or are we using color? And
does everybody have an office?
That does it, or parking. I mean, and now there's a dollar sign attached, so there's a real motivation to come up with the right solution.
And I think to your point on finding the right solution, we've seen a lot of customers, they'll look at the design costs, they'll look at the build-out costs, look at the real estate costs, and they all put that on a per square foot, and it can seem pretty daunting. And then what they do is they take their employment cost and their monthly payroll, and they put that on a per square foot cost, and all of a sudden, $18 or $20 per square foot on real estate doesn't look that crazy when your employment cost is $500 or $600 a square foot. So if you can use your culture and your values to put that into your space, and it helps you retain and attract that talent because your culture's there, all of a sudden now it's an investment instead of a cost that people are looking at.
We like to use metrics with our customers to help them really frame that up. And so over a 10-year period, the average cost for an organization is 82% of that cost is in their people, 10% is in technology, and 5% is in the built environment. And so that helps people go, oh, okay, I need to slow down and really think about this because I'm spending that 5% that I'm spending over that 10-year period is really, the only reason I'm writing a check is because we have people. So it's the why underneath it. And if you slow down and really move, I think space used to be a what, and if you could move it over into a why conversation, that's when you really create the right solutions.
Are the spaces getting smaller, or is a trend going back to a little bit more room for?
I'll try. I think individual assigned kinds of spaces are definitely smaller. We're not really seeing the per person square footage drop. It's already dropped a lot. So you reach a point where it can't go down a whole lot more. But people are investing in the we spaces that really make a difference, that make the space a place people want to come to. And that's we used to be laser focused on the individual primary spaces, and all the other space kind of got the leftover budget and the leftover energy, and it is completely reversed.
Yeah. I do think it's dangerous to look at some of the trends and say, this is the way, because we are not providing as much individual space, we can vastly reduce the amount of space that we have for our people. I think it's really more shifting the priorities of the spaces. And there's a lot of anxiety about that. When you go and you talk to a company about changing their culture, a lot of companies, and the reality is we have a relatively conservative work community. Insurance is not necessarily always on the front edge of crazy office trends. But looking at saying people are not going to have dedicated office spaces. They're going to have to figure out where they want to work every day. That's a big culture change. And we're seeing companies come at that in a lot of different ways. Principal has really taken a huge leap out to say, you could work in a different place every day. There are a lot of other companies that are reducing the size of the individual spaces, but then providing a lot of alternatives. And I think there's people all along that spectrum.
I was going to comment on Principal too, because I feel like they are kind of one of the forerunners with this experiment, and compliments to them for being a conservative insurance company. But I think one of the things that benefited them was the cost savings potential, realizing that on any given day, about 20% of their workforce was not in the office. And so when you switch to a non-assigned plan like they have, they can build for 80% of their workforce and still know they're going to have the resources available for everybody that they've got inside that day.
Are you being asked to reconsider the open workspace? There was a Harvard study this summer that said they really don't promote collaboration, may not be as productive as great increases in productivity as a first thought. Are you being asked from design, from furnishing, from tenant rehabs, are all across the board, are you being asked to reconsider that, or was it that big of a deal to begin with?
It's an issue. Open space is distracting and noisy. So, there's design, things you can do to help with that. But at the end of the day, private spaces are expensive, and they're not flexible, and so they don't really work well for the company. And so we always encourage people to really be thoughtful and have choice, so people can. you're not handcuffed to your station anymore. You can work virtually anywhere. So create spaces where people can go focus and they can do heads down work and they can collaborate and you create a space where all those options are available and then it does work.
What's at risk is the open office where there are no other options. That doesn't work. But I think instead of kill the open office and put in, 78-inch high partitions and have the rat maze of office space, I think it's a smarter solution that's saying we're going to figure out what types of spaces actually work for our people, and we're going to design the right percentage of those spaces to be included. I think one big mistake a lot of companies have made in the past is they build too many large conference rooms, and nobody wants to sit in a conference room for 18 people and have a meeting for 2. And they're underbuilding the small private spaces where you can have a phone call, you can have a quick short meeting with 2 people that does need some privacy. So I think we're seeing more honest engagement of, do you really need 5 conference rooms for 18 people, or do we need 6 for 2 and only 1 large conference room? So changing that structure.
Just one other comment there. It really matters who you're asking. So demographically, Gen Y would much rather be in an open space based on research, just categorically, and baby boomers would rather not.
We're also seeing a lot of the smaller to mid-sized users look at the principles of the world and say, I want that. Or there's a lot of great examples in Des Moines of companies that have really tricked out their office space. And so these 3, 4, 10, up to 10,000 square foot users are coming to us and saying, we want that. We want to be able to provide that. But maybe we don't need the collaborative space. We don't need all the conference rooms all the time. So we're being asked to put more of those into common areas of buildings. And we've done that in several buildings. It's been well received. But having those amenities that then 3 or 4 or 5 or 6 different customers can all take advantage of those throughout the day, instead of having to have it in their own space, but being able to share those as part of a common area in a building.
I love it when I see people asking themselves those questions by department, because it's not necessarily one size fits all even for a company, and what accounting needs might be very different than what sales needs. And so just getting really into the nuts and bolts of what those people need for their general work habits is great.
What I'd like to do now is go ahead and open it up for questions from the audience. So I need a brave soul for my first question. Anybody have a good question? Susan's always on top of the first question. Becoming the new Mike Carver. That's.
Some people are basically required to be talking to a lot of people in their work, whether it's on the phone. Other people, it can be disruptive, while other people have a lot of focused need for quiet workspace. How do you plan a space that accommodates both of those needs that are inherent in a workplace?
I think that's a little what we're talking about in terms of options. So I think, for example, I have moved from an office closed door environment where if I was having a confidential conversation or if I had multiple people on speakerphone, I could politely close my door and not bother my colleagues, and now I'm in an open cube. And I'm trying to be conscious about talking into the corner, or sometimes I'll leave my desk and go walk around or put myself in a conference room or a huddle room or something smaller, or, frankly, I'm at coffee shops or in other buildings or running around, but it's a little of the self-policing and having the choices, to Kim's point.
Yeah, we work with a lot of customers who have exactly the same need, and then it's just finding that real estate tends to be, or office space tends to be a pendulum. It was all private offices, it swung to the other side of all open. I think what most companies realize is their needs are really somewhere in the middle, but maybe not everybody needs to be in office all the time. We just had a client I know Kim's got a product that looks like a phone booth. I mean, phone booths are coming back, if you believe it. They actually built 4 of them in their space, little rooms where folks can go and make calls, and they're all stand-up desks in there. So we're seeing customers be creative with their space and trying to find those opportunities where maybe you're in a queue, but then there's plenty of those huddle rooms or those single-person rooms to be able to take advantage of when you're going to be loud.
And I think there's a fallacy in the old days when we used to have tall panels. That did not stop that noise. In fact, it actually escalates people's voices. They think they're more private than they are. And so actually by having a more visibility, people naturally lower their voices, but except for there are always a few that
I see our sales staff laughing a little bit.
I think technology too, you know, whether it's white noise that gives you a background buzz or everyone's got their earphones or headphones in now, like as the phones get sharper and better, you can talk a little more quietly.
Yeah, we see the same thing with our co-working space. We've actually built phone booths in for that exact reason. As we surveyed our members, like what is one way we can improve this, I think phone booths and lockers were the 2 things that people said they wanted the most. We've also done, I think what you said, where we've scaled down all the conference rooms. So we have twice as many conference rooms, but they're smaller because it would be 1 person on a phone call in there. And the phone thing is real, even though today's like workforce coming in doesn't know how to make phone calls, like they've just never done it. But like anybody who walks in to take a tour of our space, the very first thing they would say, every single person that walks in, like, well, I'm on the phone a lot. It's like, we're all on the phone a lot. Like, everybody else has their earbuds in. They're not necessarily paying attention, but if you were to walk past our window, you would see people pacing, you would see people on the phone booths, you would see people everywhere. Everybody just kind of fits around it and finds what works for them, and I think the key is having lots of alternatives so that people can figure out what is the best.
More questions from the audience? Yeah, in the back.
So hopefully you just touched on my question about what are you seeing for office technology? And number 2 is the day of the desk phone fading anytime soon?
I don't have a desk phone anymore. I mean, I think the quality is a little bit worse on a mobile phone, but I feel like it is a reality for people, and it simplifies things, and it's one cost savings, frankly, for the employer, one less thing IT has to help with, and I think it's better for clients, actually, to just have one number to try to reach people on. So, yes, I think it is starting to fade.
I think technology-wise, it's all about mobile and being able to connect. We just moved into a new office space, and everybody has a Surface. You can plug into any of the TVs or in the conference rooms. You can throw stuff up on the boards. I think being able to have that one device that you can take with you and make sure it works everywhere. And what's unique, just in the last few years, it used to be the CIOs or the companies or the technology team was kind of an afterthought. You know, customer would sign a lease, design a space, move in, and then say, oh yeah, somebody better let technology know we're moving. And anymore now, it's that initial showing. The technology team is in place. They want to know connectivity, they want to know cabling, they want to know the AV solutions. So all of those decisions are being made much earlier in the process. We've done a lot of private fiber networks and things like that just because it's got to be fast, it's got to be reliable. Redundancy is a big thing right now. We have multiple carriers coming into the building through multiple paths. So if the city is working and they knock out fiber, one line in, there's another line coming in. So I think it's all about being able to make sure basically the technology works and it works all the time.
I think smart cards are really cool too. I've seen some employers that have them both for egress or entrance and egress, or say getting into your building. Principal, for example, if they have a smart card and they're working anywhere in the building, they can use it at their copy machine and it charges back their department, so they know where those funds are going. Or at the company kitchens, which is a brand name, but there are a lot of different versions of it where you can scan your card and grab the granola bar, and it's kind of an honor system thing, but a lot of mobility and just kind of portability with that.
One of the things I think that's critical now more than ever is you have to get all these parts of your solution talking to each other. The technology folks have to talk to the architects, have to talk to the furniture. You know, to realize the potential of all this technology, you have to plan for it. And I think we used to have, you know, the architect planned the space and worked with the broker, and then the furniture people came in separately, and then the AV people did that. You know, that doesn't work anymore because everything's working together in a exciting but also really challenging way. So it has to be integrated.
I would add on to that too that we're seeing a new role become more robust in a project manager. And that oftentimes, these companies go through these moves once every 5-10 years, and it might be the unlucky HR or IT or somebody that is not necessarily well-equipped or have time in their busy workday to accommodate all of these factors that have to be planned for because they're very expensive. And so outsourcing that with a project manager, I think is really helpful, especially for big, complicated moves.
More questions from the audience? Yeah, Ryan.
What premium on a price per square foot basis would I expect as a office holder to pay for dog-friendly space?
Dog-friendly
space?
We have started to see requests for that in Des Moines. I don't know if I have a number for you. I don't know any landlords that do it yet unless they're very small. Actually, I take that back. I have seen dogs in offices. None of the institutional landlords are doing it yet to my knowledge. I have seen Fortune 500 leases mandate it and landlords say no. So
Right.
we're not quite there yet, but just like all the other coastal trends, I think someday we will see it.
Holmes Murphy's building's owned by NAP, and they do have an office dog, so.
They have a nice one.
Good point.
Yeah.
We're dog friendly. If you want to see dogs, come see us. Yeah, I mean, that was the thing that we didn't necessarily consider, but it was, I have an office dog, right? And other people saw him there, so they said, can we bring in our dog? And our rule is generally like, we're dog friendly so long as your dog is friendly. So we've had to sell some dogs, like, you're not an office dog. You need to
Take away the dog's passkey. Is
Yeah,
the,
exactly.
I think it's similar, and you saw this in multifamily. It used to be that wasn't, dogs weren't a thing, and then everybody started getting dogs, and so they've had to transform with it. And I think you'll begin to see. I agree. I don't know if there's an institutional landlord that's pet friendly right now, with the exception of service animals. But I think as that trend continues, you may begin to see. I guess all it takes is one large user that says we're not going in unless you let dogs in to start changing that. It's going
for
to.
it.
Yeah, exactly. It's going to be a property management. Ultimately, it's like anything else. It transforms, and I think eventually we'll find ways to make it work. I shouldn't commit us to anything, but I think the trend is. I think the trend is
It's on the
probably
record,
taking
camera's on.
place. Yeah.
You mentioned cost, and I wonder if that's something we could segue a little bit to, which is we're talking about all these nice things that we can add to the office and our investments into the office space, but I assume that's going to have a cost. So I'm just curious what you've been seeing in terms of the cost of office space in the market and what we might be able to anticipate going forward.
Yeah, well, I think lease rates are rising, and that's really a function of construction costs right now. I don't know if anybody's even tried to, add a bar to your basement or something right now. It's tough to get contractors, it's tough to get subs out there. So really, I think you're seeing a rise in construction costs, but you're also seeing a rise in design. You're seeing higher quality products, glass, all of those things cost money, and so you're just seeing that push up. Talking to landlords all over the country, Des Moines is still very affordable from an office space market. I was touring a building in Denver of 40 to 50 stories, very similar glass construction to our building, and it's almost 3 times the price. So I think you're going to continue to see prices rise, but ultimately you're getting a better product and probably an opportunity to move into higher quality space. And again, then when you put it with your employment costs, yeah, maybe you're in one of the more expensive buildings in town, but that's still just nominal compared to what you're spending overall for your employment costs. And if it saves you a couple of new hires or saves you some turnover, all of a sudden it was worth it.
What impact, though, does that more expensive space, say on Jordan Creek Parkway, have on leases in the rest of the city, rents in the rest of the city?
Well, I think ultimately it's probably giving maybe other landlords an opportunity to raise rents, but I think it's coming with an opportunity to reinvest in those properties. I think you're seeing maybe Class B and C products being invested in, be redone, adding new amenities, adding new finishes throughout, and an opportunity to push those rents up. I think for landlords that are just thinking they're going to get a free rental increase, that's probably not the case. I think customers and tenants are demanding nicer buildings, more amenities, and they're not just going to move into the same old product.
Who's calling the shots these days on rents? I mean, is it a landlord's market, tenant's market?
I'm still waiting for a landlord's market to show up. I feel like every time I read about, oh, it's a landlord's market, I'm like, we still negotiate. I wish I could call the shots, but vacant, I think there was just an article out that vacant, the JLL report this week, office vacancies are still 10 to 15%. There's still plenty of options for customers in the marketplace. We are seeing, this market really transform into a market that escalates. There's built-in annual escalations in rents. That's maybe more of a landlord-friendly thing, but I still think customers are competing in the marketplace. We're competing to win clients' business. They still have plenty of options available, and with rental rates going up, all of a sudden that opens up opportunities for build-to-suits as well. So now you're competing with existing product with new construction, and then really everything's on the table at that point if you can build a building.
I mean, it's an interesting moment in time when you look at how much money you spend on office space. We have a new standard has been established. I don't think Kyle Kraus would be surprised if I tell people that's like the most expensive office building that we're likely to see for a long time. It's interesting to see what's the Kraus Gateway Center provide, and it's totally in a class by its own. But I think we also have seen a lot of variety in what's being delivered, and they're not all super expensive. So we have, you have Kraus on one end. Holmes Murphy wanted to be pretty aggressive about cost, and so they made choices like all the structure is exposed, the inside of the precast concrete is exposed, but they also said, well, we're kind of different anyway, so we're cool with that. So again, if there's a way to find with the client and the culture, if there's a match with what their goals are economically and what they want to spend, I think there's more openness in what the solution may look like these days than there has been in the past.
I think a lot of the micro markets are starting to show themselves too. I mean, I used to feel like it was a downtown versus West Des Moines exclusive conversation, but now we've got other northwest suburbs. We've got Waukee, we've got Ankeny, we've got, Johnston. A lot of these places are coming on board, usually anchored by a major employer, but then they start to get some of the satellites that gravitate in there, and some of those just by nature have different price points.
From a co-working perspective, we don't think of cost per square foot. I mean, I do because I lease the building, but our tenants don't do that. It's all a service price, so we have a tiered market and then user fees, that type of thing. So that's probably the hardest thing to get people into our space, especially if they're a corporate user or a remote worker, is to get them out of that mindset of cost per square foot, because it's really a premium product that you're buying with the amenities that come with. So I can tell you price per square foot of everything you could use there, but if you just do your office, it's going to be astronomically expensive to be with us. But that's not what you're actually getting. So I'm glad to hear they're going up because that helps people with us. They're probably not as, but so I would say it'll be interesting to see if it shifts away from that for tenants, or if we get more people looking at our type of model as opposed to the traditional way to lease.
I'm curious about repurposing older spaces too. Geoff, you're doing that. Holmes Murphy moved out of a pretty darn nice office building on West Down Parkway. It isn't near trails. It isn't near a lot of the things that we hear new workers are looking for. How do you repurpose one, the Bank of America building, and two, the Holmes Murphy old space?
So I've got Holmes Murphy space available for and come and goes. Yeah, I think second generation opportunities are a challenge. As Adam mentioned, we get a lot of these big user, IMT or come and go, everybody that was a lessor then moving to buy their own building and do their own thing is great. It frees up second generation space that has some opportunities for landlords to reinvest. I mean, look at 909 Locust. That was an excellent example of what you can do with second generation space, and I think other landlords have to take note and know that the bar has been risen with the amenities package and the aesthetics, or they play the low-cost card. I mean, with construction being so high, it is often really valuable for some companies to find a space that's largely built out and take advantage of construction that's already completed.
The biggest problem they had is they'd outgrown that, and there weren't really good options right proximate. There's nothing wrong
They
with
told
that
us
building.
they wanted to stay if they could. It's a good location.
Yeah, it is good. I think there's a lot of those buildings have a lot of possibilities. But you do have to kind of look at it in light of the fact that we're now embedding these amenities into buildings. A building like that was not built with that mindset. So how do you come back to it and say, how can we embed some of those amenities in a building that wasn't originally conceived in that way? And I think there are some people doing that in really smart ways. And, you know, that's also a neighborhood. You know, that was built when being by Valley West Mall. I'm old enough to know that Valley West Mall was super cool. Remember? That's changing. I don't think we know what's happening to that neighborhood yet, but there's going to be a transformation there, and hopefully that building can be part of, you know, how that recreates itself.
And I think one solution for those types of buildings is the office park model, and no one does it better than R&R, but having that one building that has the amenities that are then shared across several buildings. That is the case with the now vacant Holmes Murphy building, for example. There's a wellness center and a conference room in the building next door, and they can use it, but I think that does help landlords with portfolios share the cost and provide some of those amenities across multiple buildings.
I think second generation space, especially some of those big blocks, absolutely have an afterlife. I mean, we've seen a lot of vacants across town where they come in and after the tenant moves out, there's a lot of out-of-date improvements and just gut it. And 909 Locust is a perfect example. All of a sudden, you know, that's a perfect case study in why buildings, they can transform. That's the beauty of real estate. It doesn't last 5 or 10 years with a lease. And I think if you have an owner that has a vision for it and is willing to invest some dollars to get those improvements out of there and let people really see the true potential of a space, the beauty of it is the one thing you can't change is the location. And a lot of these buildings have fantastic locations. You're in the center of it, you're in the center of town, or you're in midtown, so you have an opportunity to attract those people from all over town, but just giving it a new life and getting past. Kate can probably echo, probably everybody here, a lot of customers struggle to visualize what a space can truly look like. And if you can get everything out of the way, then all of a sudden they can begin to see what that looks like. And if your location is good and you can spend some of those dollars to invest in it, chances are it may take a little bit of time, but you're going to find somebody that can visualize that and see that and make a great value play there.
One of the topics that came up last year was some of the industrial space that are just blank slates, basically. Hy-Vee doing what they've done with their technology area. I'm just curious how the industrial market has affected the office market as well, and as those two things have kind of converged a little bit.
Yeah, we are seeing more users look at that as an option, whereas 5 or 6 years ago, they would have never done that. We're actually designing industrial space with higher parking ratios now. That was really one of the important things to Hy-Vee, was being able to get everybody on site. You may be able to fit them all in the building, but industrial spaces historically not had enough parking. So we're looking at that and making sure that when we do build an industrial building, we're building it as flexible as possible. But a lot of those things that an office user might like, we're seeing more industrial users want too. E-commerce users typically have more people, at least until they move to more automation. So a lot of those amenities can work both for an industrial and a warehouse user. We're talking about walking trails and outdoor seating for industrial buildings, things that you would have never talked about a few years ago, because we do see more of those office users wanting to take advantage of that space. It's a blank canvas. You can walk in, it's got high ceilings, and you can do about anything, you know.
And you see office users turning office into industrial or industrial feel. So you rip down the ceiling grid and the tiles and expose and go for raw concrete. And 10 years ago we would have said this is an unfinished space, and now it's move-in ready.
More questions from the audience? Yeah,
My question's probably closer for Kim or for Tim. We've talked about office space and how it's changed and evolved, and the use has evolved over the last 10 years. 10 years ago, an office, a lease would be signed, it'd be 5 or 10 years, somebody put their furnishing in, and they'd go and maybe move 5 years later and just move their furniture with that. With all the changes that are happening in technology and with furniture and standard desks and everything, what do you see as far as the life cycle of that fixture that at one time was part of an office is now the majority of the space they're occupying?
Our clients here in Iowa held onto their furniture for a very long time. And so when I would share the 10-year statistic, I would always pause and say, but I realize here in Iowa, people oftentimes hang on to their furniture and their space much longer than 10 years. But we're also seeing, if you have older furniture that is taller, bigger, clunkier, people don't want it anymore. And like, we can't even hardly get rid of it. It's hard to dispose of, and they really want something that's much fresher, much more open. I've been in this business a long time, and the cost per head, per person, for office furniture has not hardly gone up at all in the last like 40 years. Part of that's because manufacturers are more efficient, there's cost pressures, et cetera. But furniture's a pretty good bargain, in terms of just, cost and what it cost 40 years ago and what it costs today. And when you look at it as a percentage of your overall costs, it's worth the investment. And we don't see, I think most clients are taking the opportunity, if they make a physical move, that is the time to buy new. It's not free to move your old furniture. It costs money. And we actually will help a client look at those costs.
That tends to be an invisible cost.
Yeah.
And the danger is people say, I'm gonna save all this money, and then they get to the point, they don't have a project manager, they didn't really have a realistic expectation of what taking furniture that's currently occupied apart and having to find a temporary workspace for somebody while you move it, there's just a lot of complexity there. I also think the whole approach of systems furniture where 5,000 parts are all attached to each other as one big lump of stuff, we're not doing that anymore. Everything is much more modular and freestanding, and so the reality of moving it to a new space is a lot easier than the furniture that we used to install.
We just finished Come and Go. There's not a single panel in that building, not one. So you're making workstations out of a completely different product than what we used to use.
And it's all mobile in a new way. I think we're also finally seeing maybe some of the wiring, we're going to Wi-Fi. Some of the things that tended to tether all of our furniture to the floor and make it inflexible is loosening up somewhat. So we have more options about kind of truly delivering. In the 70s, they said, this is flexible. Yeah, right. I think that we're actually delivering spaces that are flexible in a way that has not been true in the past.
More questions from the audience? Catherine?
What are some really, really wild futuristic office trends that you predict? I mean, babies are now allowed in the office. Maybe it's sleeping pods, maybe it's, what are some really wild, I mean, we're gonna have driverless cars pretty soon.
Don't take mine, Catherine, it's gonna be mine.
So I'm just curious, I mean, looking, way out to the future, what are some trends at the trade shows you guys are seeing?
This is a topic that fascinates me, so I love reading about this. I think potentially one of the single greatest impacts in commercial real estate is going to be the move to driverless cars. I was in a different market and I was touring a parking garage. The life of a commercial real estate broker. Let me tell you, it is designed at 0 grade, and the ramps are mobile so that you can take it apart and put it back together as an apartment building. It's made with higher ceilings so that you could convert it to an apartment. I think Des Moines may be slower than other markets to adapt to the autonomous car or more car sharing or concepts like that. But if you just think about the number of, there's like 5 billion parking stalls, and those are going to go away eventually, or at least it's going to start to get smaller. And what happens to all of that space? Now all of a sudden where we had parking lots, we can do a lot of different things. It may not impact the market like Des Moines, like it would Manhattan, where you can build up and there's a lot more demand for that. But I think the other thing that we're watching too is parcel delivery. As more people buy things on Amazon, what do you do with all that stuff? I walked by an apartment in New York, and the bellman was standing there, and there were probably 45 different sized Amazon packages at his feet. So what do we do with that to get parcel delivery to units? And that's not just a one-day thing, that's an everyday occurrence. So how do we make sure we get parcels and package securely to people? I think will be another trend that'll will impact commercial real estate.
I think it'll be great to watch the health and well-being trends really get even further adapted in the office space. I mean, right now we hear that sitting will kill you and you're going to go blind from your computer screen, and someday, you know, we'll really perfect how you can either sit, stand, or walk, or move around to these different, you know, to be developed, I suppose, pieces of office equipment, and maybe the computer light will help me get my vitamin D and actually improve my complexion or something like that. And I think, you know, we hear about green walls, but I think even taking that a step further, where living plants and trees, and I've seen touches where, you know, they want a fruit tree, so somebody can grab a fresh apple off the tree in the office. Yes. Or maybe some herbs that they can put in their water or something like that. So who knows? Watch for some of those trends in a major metro near you.
There actually are sleeping pods. You can buy them. I don't. And places, I think, like, you know, if you have programmers or, you know, IT people that are there, like, I mean, they work really weird hours, and so that's where you're seeing that application, but I could see it come into, first you have to culturally accept the fact that a nap is okay, but it is available. I can get you one.
I'll call you tomorrow.
Yeah,
Isn't that what a wellness room is?
Yeah, well, that's right. When you think about the driverless cars, just, I think we are in a process of the work environment sort of dissipating and people working in different places at different times, having freedom. We're also already seeing, you know, vacation pay going away. And I don't know if so like Holmes Murphy, you take vacation, like just take it, which seems crazy to me. But it's sort of the autonomy of everybody to like take, you know what you gotta do, take care of it, and you can do it wherever you want. I think that dissolution of the work environment is balanced by the desire for culture and some kind of shared experience. Somewhere in between those two, we're gonna find a balance. And I think we're in the middle of figuring out what that balance looks like. But we don't all have to be in the same space anymore. But we do want to understand what it means to work for the company that we work for. And I want my people to know that working for me is different than working for some other architect. But if they're all working at home, or if they're working in their driverless car, what is that culture and how do I impact that? I think that's going to be interesting questions for us to face.
I always find myself asking this during our office roundtables, but as this new approach, has anyone studied the level of productivity that results from this, from these changes in the office?
It's hugely generationally affected. And one of the challenges we see with a lot of this is people as old as me and older are worried that their productivity will drop. And I think a well-managed project protects the productivity of the older generation as well as encouraging the productivity of younger folks. You know, if you're under 30, you can do 7 things at the same time while sitting in the middle of a room with 50 people. And I can't do that. So productivity means different things to different people.
Well, and I'd also add productivity, I think a lot of times is thought of as task work getting performed. It's like a production type of number. But companies have to be innovative. And so how do you put a price on that kind of productivity where you are giving people the opportunity to pause and think and stretch their imagination to come up with new ideas so their organization stays relevant. And that's where I feel like there's this, you know, pull and tug inside of organizations where there's this push to get, you know, to be productive, but you can't do it at the cost of being innovative. And so it's a balance.
That's what I wonder, whether whether we have a high-bound definition of productivity that really doesn't stand up to what's happening in the office.
Kind of shows
place
up
today.
in the financial numbers.
Mhm.
Well, I told you this hour would go quick. We are just about out of time. I want to give you each a chance to give one final thought. And what I thought would be great is there's a number of topics we could have gone down the path of. And so if we could have each of you talk about something maybe that we wish we could have talked about further and explored maybe a little bit further. And so Kate, I'll start down with you this time so that Tim gets the final thought.
Okay, not quite
I should
well
have started in the middle,
crystallized,
just
so this might just, I think I'll just touch back on, we talked around it and a little bit with the project management, but that this whole idea of finding the right solution is more complicated than it used to be, and there are more facets, and there are more experts, and there are more layers, and it's getting democratized, and there are more choices, and I just feel like get ahead of it, and there should be and could be and will be that much more emphasis on the planning part of it. So make sure that you're getting your stakeholders and your experts together well before you start to need to shop for space, because there are so many critical decisions that have to be made before you start shopping.
Sorry.
We live in a wonderful time. I feel like companies did not look at their space through the lens they look at today. So we are guilty of, furnishing and outfitting spaces that I wouldn't want to work in personally, years ago. And so it was because we had a process lens. Everything was about cost and process. And the people component wasn't even in the conversation. And today, the people conversation is first. And so we're creating spaces that people want to be in. And I just think it's a great moment in time for workers to really have this opportunity to be in spaces that, what we say, spaces that matter.
I think one of the most exciting trends in commercial real estate in Des Moines is just that melding of suburban and urban office spaces. You're seeing amenities really go back and forth. Buildings in the East Village going up to include parking, more of a suburban amenity. And then you're seeing we're building buildings in the suburbs that include food trucks and on-site coffee shops and things like that. So I think one of the uniquenesses of Des Moines right now is because those commute times are so low, you're not maybe seeing the pull to one market or the other, but you're seeing people wherever they are, they want those unique amenities, and they want whatever they get in the suburbs, they want downtown, and whatever they want downtown, they want to be able to get those in the suburbs. And I think that's elevating the real estate game, both downtown in the East Village, all over downtown, as well as in the suburban markets.
Yeah, I think the thing that is interesting to me, and kind of thinking about your question earlier of like what's innovative that's coming, in our new space, the thing that people are most excited about are almost the old school things that we put in, and it's the custom furniture we built. We have a 75-seat auditorium that's a big set of stairs that's just a bunch of maple kind of solid all the way together. And when people see that, they're just like, this auditorium is amazing. And like, that's what's drawing people in. And then we have like a maple and steel, kind of like a set of restaurant booths that are intended to be just like quick meeting spaces. Like, hey, you walked in the door, let's sit over here and talk. Those feel very old school in function to me, but it's looked at as innovative in the way that we're doing it. And that's really bringing people in. And so it's almost kind of paradoxical in what the function is.
He has a stepatorium. We've been trying to get a stepatorium in a project for like a long time. I think that Adam earlier said, looking at your space as a tool. I do think if companies can see a new space as an opportunity to define their aspirations, then the design of that space is actually a tool to help them reach that. I think in the market, there's a realization of the power of that, and I think that's going to increase.
Thank you all for coming today and for your great questions from the audience. And can I get a big round of applause for our panelists today? This is the first of 5 of these that we're going to be doing this year. And so if you were here today, which you are, you're going to be getting more in the future from us. Also, the annual real estate magazine this year, that is going to be coming out on April 24th or 26th. Thank you. April 26th, so be on the lookout for that. We'll do a commercial real estate panel. So one of the nice things about doing this is Ken's hosting 4 of these similar events, but without an audience. And from that helps us build out what types of things that we're going to do for our main event. So that event is going to be on April 24th. And so again, you'll be receiving information about that too, so that you can come be a part of that. That's coming up on February 14th is our first Power Breakfast of the year. The title of that is going to be How They Built It, and we've got a panel of great business owners and business leaders that are going to be sharing some of their best practices and tips from how they built their businesses. So, and our own Connie Weimer's agreed to do it, and she hasn't done that a lot, and I don't think ever really, so I'm pretty excited to be able to ask her some questions, so that'll be kind of fun to do. Chris Nelson from Kemen will be a part of that as well, along with Casey Neiman from AgriSync, and Nancy Merwatsi from what was formerly Pi 515, and Nancy Johnson from the Pyramid Theater Company. So it's going to be a great group. Registrations are open for that on our website right now. As I said before, our best questions and our best stories that we write are because of things from you. So if something today spurred an idea, or you've got a follow-up topic, Kent would be happy to take your questions, take your story ideas. In the back of the room also, Perry Beeman, give me a little wave. Perry is our managing editor. He's always looking for stories, especially at economic development and transportation, some of these topics. And Suzanne Benke, our editor as well. And also, let's just do a quick, all the way in the back, we have John Retzloff. John, you can give a quick wave. John helps put together our daily e-newsletters, our On the Moves and things like that. And brand new to our team, Susanna DeBaca. She's now will be the new president, or is the new president for Business Publications, which publishes Business Record and DSM Magazine. So thank you all again for coming today, and can I get a final round of applause for our panel? Thank you.